This is the news in brief from the United Nations. More than 5 million people have fled across Ukraine's borders since the Russian invasion just 7 weeks ago, the UN refugee agency UNHCR said on Wednesday. Latest data from the UNHCR Ukraine Crisis Portal indicates that 5,034,439 people have sought shelter in neighbouring countries. Poland continues to host the highest number of refugees at more than 2.8 million, followed by Romania with 757,000 and Russia at nearly 550,000. Here's the UN Refugee Agency's Shabia Mantu.
5 million refugees have been forced to run for their lives, leaving their country, their homes and their belongings. And these numbers will continue to rise as hostilities intensify and as the war continues. People will continue to flee every day in the absence of peace.
To date, the UN Human Rights Office, OHCHR, has verified nearly 4,900 civilian casualties in the war, 2,072 killed and more than 2,800 injured. Most were victims of explosive weapons with a wide impact area, OHCHR said, adding that the true number is almost certainly much higher, as many areas cannot be accessed because of ongoing hostilities. The killing of at least 9 people in an attack on 2 schools in Kabul on Tuesday has been strongly condemned by the UN chief Antonio Guterres. Targeting non-combatants and civilian infrastructure is strictly prohibited under international humanitarian law, he tweeted. His comments came after 2 explosions hit the 2 learning institutions in a largely Hazara Shia minority neighbourhood in Kabul, which has been targeted many times in the past. The UN Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan, Richard Bennett, added his voice to international outrage at the attacks and joined the UN Rights Office in calling for an investigation and accountability. Advice for HIV patients now from the UN Health Agency WHO, urging countries to adopt a new treatment for an associated secondary infection of cryptococcal disease, which can be deadly unless correctly treated. Cryptococcus is a common fungus that lives in the soil and in bird droppings that can infect the lining of the brain and spinal cord, contributing to illness, disability and mortality, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. WHO described it as one of the most important opportunistic infections among people living with advanced HIV. The new treatment involves giving a single high dose of the antifungal agent liposomal amphotericin B to people with HIV who have cryptococcal meningitis. Daniel Johnson, UN News. This is the news in brief from the United Nations. Disarmament research agency UNIDIR called on Thursday for more women to take their rightful place in international security discussions, a move that's been warmly welcomed by UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet. Ms. Bachelet said that Russia's invasion of Ukraine had created a new threat to the global peace and security that's the basis for sustainable development and all human rights, and that the war had compounded the negative consequences around the world for everyone, but particularly for women and girls. The High Commissioner cited research that correlates high levels of military spending with poor women's rights and noted that none of the ceasefire agreements reached between 2018 and 2020 included any provision for people's gender. This male-dominated trend has continued in the Ukraine conflict, where only 2 women have been involved in negotiations between Kiev and Moscow since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ms. Bachelet continued. UN humanitarians warned on Thursday of dire food insecurity in South Sudan, where the cost of wheat has been driven up by the Ukraine war, putting these staples beyond the reach of many vulnerable South Sudanese at the peak of the lean season, according to the World Food Programme. The UN agency said that more than 7.7 million food insecure people across the country will struggle to survive amidst record floods, displacement and ongoing conflict. In related coverage, the head of UN peacekeeping, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, briefed the Security Council on the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Abyei, citing that violence had increased the need for aid assistance to a staggering 240,000 people. The number of new COVID-19 cases and deaths has continued to fall since the end of March, the UN Health Agency has said. According to latest weekly data, over 5 million infections were reported to the 17th of April, along with more than 18,000 deaths, decreases of 24% and 12% respectively, compared to the previous 7-day period. All regions reported decreasing infections and deaths, the World Health Organization said in its latest epidemiological update. Globally, WHO's coronavirus platform indicates more than 504 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic, including more than 6.2 million deaths. More than 11.3 million vaccines have been administered. Daniel Johnson, UN News.